You're either a witness or an accomplice.
I should have known something was wrong when Vanessa started forgetting her underwear. Not losing them in the laundry or leaving them in the gym bag, forgetting to put them on entirely. She'd stand in our marble-tiled bathroom applying her third coat of mascara, wearing a dress that cost more than my first car, and I'd catch a glimpse in the mirror, nothing underneath. "Big meeting today?" I asked, watching her spray herself with that expensive perfume she'd started buying, the kind that came in bottles smaller than shot glasses and cost more than our mortgage payment. "Client dinner," she said without looking at me. "Peterson's bringing the whole board." Peterson, her CEO, the guy who looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne commercial and talked like he'd swallowed a business textbook. I'd met him at company parties, the kind of man who shook your hand while already looking past you for someone more important. "Need a ride?" I offered, knowing the answer. "Company car's picking me up." She turned, and for a second I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt? Excitement? Hard to tell with all that makeup. "Don't wait up!" The honk outside was sharp, impatient. Through our bedroom window, I watched her climb into a black sedan with tinted windows. The driver didn't get out to open her door. She didn't seem to mind. I stood there in my boxer shorts and old college t-shirt, watching my wife of 12 years disappear into the night like she was heading to some secret mission, which, as it turned out, she was. "My name's David Chen." No, wait, that's not right. Let me start over. "I'm David Sullivan, and if this were a Stephen King novel, I'd probably be the guy who gets possessed by an evil car or eaten by his own lawnmower. Instead, I'm just the guy whose wife decided to turn their marriage into a networking opportunity. I'm 43, self-made, and apparently stupid enough to think that love conquers all. I started with nothing, grew up in a trailer park in Ohio, worked construction through college, and built my way up to owning a small investment firm. Not Wall Street big, but comfortable. Upper middle-class suburban comfortable, with a house that has more bathrooms than people, and a driveway that could park a small aircraft. Vanessa came from money. Old Connecticut money. The kind that whispers instead of shouts and judges you by your shoes. When we met 15 years ago, she was slumming it in graduate school, getting her MBA while living off a trust fund. I was the scholarship kid who fixed her computer and somehow convinced her to go out with me. For a while, it worked. She liked my rough edges. I liked her polish. She taught me which fork to use at fancy dinners. I taught her that not everything worthwhile comes with a pedigree. We were a team, but teams require trust, and trust requires honesty. And somewhere along the way, Vanessa had decided that honesty was optional. I should have seen the signs earlier. The late nights that became later nights. The new clothes that appeared in her closet like expensive ghosts. The way she'd started looking at me like I was furniture. Useful, familiar, but ultimately replaceable. The laptop was sitting on the kitchen counter when I came downstairs for coffee. Vanessa had left in such a hurry that she'd forgotten to close it. The screen was still glowing, showing her email inbox. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'm not ashamed either. When someone's lying to your face every day, you stop worrying about privacy and start worrying about survival. Her password was Princess 123, our dog's name plus her favorite number. Real creative, Van. The first email that caught my attention was from Peterson himself. Subject line, tonight's arrangements. V, car will pick you up at 7. Sarah and Michelle confirmed for the full presentation. Remember what we discussed about the Henderson account. Looking forward to your enthusiasm. J. Sarah and Michelle were her co-workers, young, ambitious, and apparently part of whatever presentation required enthusiasm in italics. I scrolled down, more emails, going back months, a whole thread titled Special Projects that had nothing to do with quarterly reports and everything to do with what Vanessa was willing to do for her next promotion. The details made my coffee taste like battery acid. Can't wait to see you in the red dress. Leave the husband at home. This is grown-up time. J. David's getting suspicious. Maybe we should cool it for a week? V. Your husband's a nobody. Stop worrying about him and start thinking about your career. The Singapore promotion is still on the table. J. A. Nobody. 12 years of marriage and I'd been downgraded to a nobody. I kept reading, my hands shaking slightly as I scrolled through months of planning. It wasn't just an affair. It was a whole system. Peterson had his pick of the female executives, and they competed for his attention like it was an Olympic sport. The married ones were worth extra points, and Vanessa was winning. The garage door rumbled open around 11 p.m. I'd spent the last 4 hours sitting in my home office, staring at spreadsheets and trying to figure out how to process what I'd learned. My investment portfolio was heavily tied to Vanessa's company, Peterson Industries. If their stock tanked, I'd lose everything. If I exposed the affair, I'd be destroying my own financial future. Checkmate, you bastard. Vanessa walked in wearing the same dress, but somehow looking completely different. Her hair was mussed, her lipstick was gone, and she had that satisfied glow that I used to think was meant for me. "How was the client dinner?" I asked from the couch, not looking up from my book. "Productive." She kicked off her heels and headed for the stairs. "Peterson thinks we'll close the Henderson deal by Friday." "That's great. What did you eat?" She paused on the third step. "What?" "At dinner. What did you eat?" "Oh, the salmon. It was salmon," she resumed climbing. "I'm exhausted. Don't wake me up when you come to bed." I waited until I heard the shower running, then pulled out my phone and called Tommy Reeves. Tommy and I had been friends since high school. He'd gone into police work while I'd gone into business, but we'd stayed close. These days, he ran a small private investigation firm, specializing in insurance fraud and cheating spouses. "Dave, it's almost midnight, man. What's wrong?" "I need your help," I said, "and I need you to keep it quiet." "Cheating wife?" "Worse, cheating wife with a system." Tommy was quiet for a moment. "How much worse?" "The kind that could destroy me financially if I handle it wrong." "I'll be right over." 20 minutes later, Tommy was sitting in my kitchen, looking at Vanessa's laptop while I paced around the island like a caged animal. He was a big guy, built like the linebacker he'd been in high school, with graying hair and the kind of steady presence that made people confess things they hadn't planned to say. "Jesus, Dave," he said after reading through the emails. "This isn't just an affair. This is like a whole corporate culture. Can we prove it? We can document it, but proving it in a way that doesn't destroy you? That's trickier." He leaned back in his chair. "What's your goal here? You want her back, or you want revenge?" I thought about that for a long moment. Upstairs, I could hear Vanessa moving around in our bedroom, getting ready for another night of pretending to be asleep when I came up. "I want them to pay," I said finally. "All of them." Tommy grinned. "Now you're talking my language." The next morning, Vanessa left early for a breakfast meeting. I watched from the window as the same black sedan picked her up, and this time, I was ready. Tommy was parked across the street in his beat-up Honda Civic, looking like any other suburban dad heading to work. I followed in my own car, a 5-year-old BMW that Vanessa constantly complained wasn't impressive enough for her colleagues. Today, I was grateful for its anonymity. The breakfast meeting was at the Marriott downtown. I parked in the garage and took the elevator to the lobby, where I had a clear view of the restaurant entrance. Tommy positioned himself at the bar, nursing a coffee and reading a newspaper like he had all the time in the world. Vanessa walked in at 8:15, wearing a business suit that probably cost more than most people's rent. She wasn't alone. Sarah Kim and Michelle Torres, two of her coworkers, flanked her like backup singers. All three women looked like they'd stepped out of a corporate recruiting poster, polished, professional, and predatory. Peterson was already at the table, holding court like a king receiving tribute. He stood when they approached, kissing each woman on both cheeks in a way that lingered just long enough to be inappropriate. His hands rested on their backs a beat too long, and none of them pulled away. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see the dynamic. Peterson talked. They listened. He made jokes. They laughed. He touched their arms, their shoulders, their hands. And they let him. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. "Getting photos, stay put." The breakfast lasted 2 hours. I watched my wife flirt with her boss while I sat in a hotel lobby, feeling like a private investigator in my own life. When they finally stood to leave, Peterson handed each woman an envelope. Not business envelopes, personal ones, the kind you might use for a thank you note or an invitation. Vanessa slipped hers into her purse without opening it. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done in 12 years of marriage. I searched through Vanessa's things. Her purse, her dresser, her side of the walk-in closet that had somehow expanded to take up 3/4 of the space. I found the envelope tucked inside a jewelry box behind a pair of earrings I'd given her for our anniversary. Inside was a key card and a handwritten note. Presidential suite, 8 p.m., wear the blue dress. J. The blue dress was hanging in her closet, tag still on. Expensive, revealing, and definitely not something she'd wear to a client dinner with the whole board. I photographed everything, then put it all back exactly as I'd found it. By the time Vanessa got home, I was in my office working on a quarterly report, like nothing had changed. How was your day? She asked, poking her head through the doorway. Busy. Yours? The usual. Listen, I have another client thing tonight. Peterson's bringing in some investors from Singapore, and he wants the whole team there. The whole team? Well, the senior staff. She was already backing out of the room. I might be late again. Seems like you're having a lot of late nights lately. She froze in the doorway. It's a demanding job, David. Not everyone can work from home in their pajamas. The dig hit its mark. I'd been working from home since starting my own firm, and Vanessa never missed a chance to remind me that I wasn't climbing any corporate ladders. Just saying I miss spending time with my wife. Well, maybe if you'd built a real business instead of playing day trader, you'd understand what it takes to succeed in the real world. She was gone before I could respond, her heels clicking down the hallway like sharp cracks. At 7:30, I was parked outside the Marriott again. Tommy was in the lobby, posing as a businessman waiting for a meeting. We'd worked out a system of signals. If he needed me to move, he'd call and let it ring twice. Vanessa arrived at 7:50, alone this time. She'd changed into the blue dress, and she looked stunning. For a moment, watching her walk through the lobby with that confident stride, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her. Then I remembered why I was sitting in a parking garage with a private investigator, and the feeling passed. She went straight to the elevators. Tommy followed at a distance, getting off on the floor below and taking the stairs to the presidential level. His text came 20 minutes later. She's in there, so are the other two. Peterson answered the door in a bathrobe. I sat in my car for 3 hours, watching people come and go from the hotel, wondering how my life had become a bad detective movie. Around midnight, my phone rang. They're coming down, Tommy said. Separate elevators. Your wife looks disheveled. I watched through the garage entrance as Vanessa emerged from the elevator, her perfect hair now messy, her makeup smudged. She was carrying her shoes, walking barefoot across the marble lobby like she was sneaking out of a one-night stand. Which, I suppose, she was. The black sedan was waiting. She climbed in without looking back, and I followed them home, maintaining enough distance to avoid being spotted. By the time I pulled into our driveway, she was already upstairs, and I could hear the shower running. I went to my office and opened my laptop. Tommy had already emailed me the photos. Vanessa entering the hotel, Peterson in his bathrobe, the three women leaving at different times. Nothing explicitly illegal, but definitely not the kind of images you'd want your shareholders to see. But photos weren't enough. I needed more. I spent the next week playing the perfect husband. I brought Vanessa coffee in bed, complimented her outfits, asked about her work with genuine interest. She seemed surprised by the attention, but not suspicious. If anything, she seemed relieved that I wasn't asking difficult questions. Meanwhile, Tommy was building a case. He'd identified the pattern. The client dinners happened twice a week, always at the same hotel, always with the same group of women. He'd photographed Peterson's car in the hotel garage, tracked the company credit card payments for the suite, even gotten friendly with a housekeeper who confirmed that the presidential suite was being used for private meetings that required extra cleaning afterward. This guy's not even trying to hide it, Tommy told me over beers at Murphy's, the dive bar where we'd been meeting to compare notes. He's got a corporate account set up specifically for these hotel rooms. The receipts all say client entertainment. What about the other husbands? Sarah Kim's married to a lawyer named Robert. Michelle Torres just got engaged to some tech guy named Brad. Both guys seem clueless. Should we tell them? Tommy shook his head. Not yet. Right now we're gathering intelligence. Once we move, it's going to be war. You sure you're ready for that? I thought about Vanessa's comment about my pajama business, about Peterson calling me a nobody, about 12 years of marriage being reduced to a minor inconvenience in my wife's career plan. I'm ready. Good, because I found something else. Tommy pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot. Peterson's company is about to announce a major merger with a Singapore firm. Stock's going to go through the roof. How do you know? Because your wife's been buying Peterson Industries stock with a personal account. Small amounts, spread out over several months, but it adds up. If she knows about the merger before it's announced, that's insider trading. Bingo. And if we can prove she got the information through her extracurricular activities, well, that's a whole different kind of crime. I stared at the screenshot, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. It was one thing to discover that your wife was cheating. It was another to realize she was also a criminal. What's the plan? Tommy grinned. We're going to give them exactly what they deserve. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We were going to let them hang themselves. Tommy had a contact at the SEC, a former colleague who'd moved from police work into financial crimes. She couldn't act on unofficial information, but she could certainly pay attention if certain trading patterns happened to come to her notice through official channels. Meanwhile, I started making my own moves. Quietly, carefully, I began shifting my investment portfolio away from Peterson Industries. I sold my shares in small batches, spacing the transactions out over several weeks to avoid triggering any automated alerts. With the money, I bought stock in Peterson's competitors, companies that would benefit when the merger fell apart. Because it was going to fall apart. Tommy and I were going to make sure of that. The first phase of our plan began on a Thursday morning. Vanessa had left early for another breakfast meeting, and I was sitting in my office when my phone rang. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Jennifer Walsh from the Wall Street Journal. I'm working on a story about corporate culture in the tech industry, and I understand your wife works for Peterson Industries?" I'd been expecting the call. Tommy had reached out to his media contacts, planting seeds about Peterson's unconventional management style. Nothing actionable yet, just enough to get reporters interested. "She does," I said carefully. "But I don't really get involved in her work." "Of course. I was actually hoping to speak with her directly. We're looking into some allegations about inappropriate workplace relationships, and we'd like to give the company a chance to respond." "Allegations? Nothing specific yet, but we've received some tips about executive behavior that might be of interest to shareholders. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" I let the silence stretch for a moment. "I'm sorry, I can't help you. You might try reaching out to their PR department." "I'll do that. Thank you for your time, Mr. Sullivan." After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and smiled. The first domino was wobbling. That evening, Vanessa came home agitated. She paced around the kitchen while I cooked dinner, her phone buzzing constantly with calls she ignored. "Everything okay?" I asked, stirring the pasta sauce. "Some reporter's been calling the office, asking questions about Peterson's management style." She stopped pacing and looked at me. "You didn't talk to any reporters, did you?" "About what?" "About... I don't know. Anything." I turned to face her, letting concern show on my face. "Van, what's going on? You've been stressed for weeks." For a moment, I thought she might tell me the truth. Her face softened, and she looked like the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, uncertain, human. Then her phone rang. Peterson's name flashed on the screen. "I have to take this," she said, walking out of the kitchen. I could hear her voice from the hallway, low and urgent. "No, I didn't say anything. I don't know how they found out. We need to be more careful." When she came back, the vulnerable woman was gone, replaced by the polished executive who'd been living in our house for the past year. "I have to go out," she said. "Emergency meeting." "At 9 o'clock at night?" "It's a crisis, David. The Singapore deal is at risk." She was gone within minutes, leaving behind the smell of expensive perfume and the sound of lies echoing in our empty house. I waited an hour, then drove to the Marriott. Tommy was already in position, and this time we had backup. Robert Kim, Sarah's husband, was parked across the street in his Lexus. It had taken some convincing to bring Robert into our operation. Tommy had approached him carefully, starting with casual questions about his wife's work schedule. When Robert mentioned that Sarah had been working late several nights a week, Tommy had suggested they compare notes. The revelation that both our wives were involved in the same special projects had hit Robert like a physical blow. He was a quiet guy, a tax attorney who wore sweater vests and collected vintage watches. The idea that his wife was cheating with her boss had shattered something fundamental in his worldview, but it had also made him angry. And angry people, I was learning, could be very useful allies. "They're all up there," Tommy's voice came through my earpiece. "Peterson, your wife, Sarah, Michelle, and two guys I don't recognize. Probably the Singapore investors." "How long have they been up there?" "About an hour, but Dave, this looks different. More people, more formal. I think this might actually be a business meeting." I felt a stab of doubt. What if I was wrong? What if Vanessa really was just working late and I was the paranoid husband destroying his marriage over nothing? Then Robert's voice crackled through the radio. "Sarah just texted me, says she's at home with food poisoning." The doubt evaporated. We waited. At 11:30, the Singapore investors left. Two middle-aged men in expensive suits who looked satisfied with their evening's entertainment. At midnight, Michelle Torres emerged from the elevator, her hair disheveled and her dress wrinkled. Sarah Kim came down 20 minutes later, looking around the lobby nervously before hurrying to her car. Vanessa was the last to leave, at 12:45. She walked slowly like she was exhausted, and for a moment I felt a flicker of the old protective instinct. Then I remembered the lies, the insults, the casual cruelty of being called a nobody, and the feeling passed. "Follow her," I told Tommy. "I'm going up." "Dave, that's not the plan." But I was already moving, crossing the lobby to the elevators with the kind of focused determination that had gotten me through college and built my business. I had the presidential suite number from Tommy's surveillance, and I had a story ready if anyone asked what I was doing there. The hallway was empty, dimly lit by wall sconces that cast long shadows on the carpet. I could hear voices from behind the suite door. Peterson's laugh, low and satisfied. I pressed my ear to the door. "Told you the Singapore deal was a sure thing," Peterson was saying. "My girls delivered exactly what those investors wanted. What about the reporter?" A woman's voice. I didn't recognize it. "Handled. I've got contacts at the Journal. The story's dead." "And the husbands?" Peterson laughed again. "What about them? Sullivan's a nobody, Kim's a pushover, and Torres isn't even married yet. They're not going to cause any trouble." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "The merger announcement goes out Monday," Peterson continued. "Stock's going to triple overnight. Anyone who got in early is going to make a fortune." "What about the SEC investigation?" "What investigation? There's no paper trail connecting the stock purchases to inside information. As far as anyone can prove, my executives are just really good at picking investments." I'd heard enough. I backed away from the door and headed for the elevator, my hands shaking with rage and adrenaline. By the time I reached the parking garage, I'd already forwarded the recording to Tommy and started composing an email to Jennifer Walsh at the Wall Street Journal. The second domino was about to fall. The Wall Street Journal story broke on Friday morning with the headline, "Peterson Industries Under Investigation for Insider Trading." The article was carefully worded, full of alleged and sources close to the investigation, but the damage was immediate. Peterson Industries stock dropped 15% in the first hour of trading. I was in my office watching the numbers fall on my computer screen when Vanessa burst through the door without knocking. "Did you do this?" she demanded, waving her phone at me. "Do what?" "Don't play dumb, David. The Journal story. Did you talk to that reporter?" I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. She looked haggard, older than her 38 years. The stress was eating at her, and part of me felt sorry for the woman I'd once loved, but only part of me. "I told you I didn't talk to any reporters," I said calmly. "Then how did they find out about the Singapore deal? Maybe because your boss is an idiot who thinks he's untouchable?" Vanessa stared at me for a long moment. "You know, it wasn't a question." "I know a lot of things, Van. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" She sank into the chair across from my desk, all the fight going out of her at once. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." "Are you going to divorce me?" I had been asking myself the same question for weeks. The old David, the guy who'd fallen in love with a rich girl and spent 15 years trying to prove he was worthy of her, would have tried to save the marriage. He would have suggested counseling, begged her to end the affair, promised to be a better husband. But that David was gone, replaced by someone harder and more calculating. "I haven't decided yet," I said. "Depends on what happens next." "What do you want?" "I want you to tell me the truth, all of it." So she did. Sitting in my office while her company's stock continued to tank, Vanessa told me everything. How it had started as innocent flirtation at a company party. How Peterson had made it clear that advancement at his company required certain considerations. How she'd convinced herself that it was just business, just networking, just the price of success in a man's world. "It wasn't supposed to mean anything," she said, tears running down her cheeks. "It was just a transaction." "And the insider trading?" "Peterson said it was a bonus, a way to make sure his top performers were properly compensated for their flexibility." "How much did you make?" "About 200,000. It's in a separate account." I nodded, filing that information away. "Who else knows about this?" "Sarah, Michelle, 3 other women from the Singapore office, Peterson's assistant, maybe a few others." "Any of their husbands?" "I don't think so. We were all very careful." Careful, as if adultery and securities fraud were just another business risk to be managed. "What happens now?" she asked. Before I could answer, my phone rang. Tommy's name on the caller ID. I need to take this, I said. Dave, we've got a problem, Tommy said as soon as I picked up. Robert Kim just called. Sarah confessed everything to him this morning, and he's talking about going to the police. I looked at Vanessa, who was watching me with desperate eyes. Can you stall him? Maybe, but there's something else. Peterson's called an emergency meeting for all the involved parties. Tonight, 8 p.m., at his house in Greenwich. He's panicking. Good. Let him panic. Dave, if they're all getting together to coordinate their stories, we might lose our chance to... We're not losing anything, I said. In fact, this is perfect. After I hung up, Vanessa was staring at me with something like fear. You're planning something, she said. I'm planning to give everyone exactly what they deserve. David, please. I know I screwed up, but if this goes public, I'll go to prison. We'll lose everything. We've already lost everything, Van. You made sure of that. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our perfectly manicured lawn and our perfectly normal suburban street. In a few hours, none of it would matter. Here's what's going to happen, I said without turning around. You're going to go to Peterson's meeting tonight. You're going to act like nothing's changed, and you're going to wear a wire. What? Tommy's got the equipment. You'll record everything they say about covering up the insider trading, about the affairs, about their plans to destroy evidence. Then you're going to turn that recording over to the FBI. I can't do that. They'll know it was me. They're going to know anyway. The question is whether you want to be a defendant or a cooperating witness. Vanessa was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red but determined. What do I get out of it? You get to avoid federal prison. And maybe, if you're very lucky and very convincing, you get to keep half of what we built together. And if I don't do it? I turned to face her, and I let her see the cold calculation in my eyes. Then I released the photos, the recordings, and the financial records to every major news outlet in the country. Peterson Industries becomes a cautionary tale, you become unemployable, and I keep everything while you explain to a federal judge why you thought insider trading was just good business. She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. You've changed, she said. No, I replied. I've just stopped pretending to be someone I'm not. That evening, I sat in Tommy's surveillance van outside Peterson's Greenwich mansion, listening to my wife destroy the life she'd built on lies and betrayal. The wire Tommy had given her was state-of-the-art, picking up every word with crystal clarity. Peterson was in full damage control mode, pacing around his living room while the assembled conspirators sat on his leather furniture like students being lectured by an angry professor. The journal story is just the beginning, Peterson was saying. If the SEC starts digging, they're going to find the stock transactions. We need to make sure our stories align. What about the hotel records? Sarah Kim asked. Her voice was shaky, frightened. I've got people working on that. The important thing is that we all stick to the same narrative. These were legitimate business meetings, client entertainment. Nothing inappropriate happened. What if they have photos? Michelle Torres sounded close to tears. Photos of what? Business dinners? Hotel meetings? There's nothing illegal about any of that. James, Vanessa's voice was steady, professional. What about the insider information? If they can prove we knew about the merger before it was announced, they can't prove anything. The information came through legitimate channels, market research, industry contacts, educated guesses. We're smart investors, not criminals. Tommy looked at me and grinned. This guy's going to talk himself right into a federal indictment. The meeting went on for 2 hours, with Peterson alternately threatening and reassuring his co-conspirators. By the end, they had a coordinated story that might have worked if it weren't being recorded by federal law enforcement. When Vanessa finally came home, she looked exhausted. It's done, she said, handing me the wire. I got everything. How do you feel? She thought about it for a moment. Empty, like I've been hollowed out. That's because you have been. By him, by the lies, by pretending to be someone you're not. Is there any way back from this, David? For us, I mean. I looked at my wife. Really looked at her, for the first time in months. Underneath the expensive makeup and designer clothes, I could see traces of the woman I'd fallen in love with. But I could also see the woman who'd called me a nobody, who'd traded her integrity for a promotion, who'd turned our marriage into a business transaction. I don't know, I said honestly, but we're going to find out. The FBI raid on Peterson Industries happened at dawn on Tuesday morning. I watched it on the news from my office, sipping coffee while federal agents carried boxes of documents out of the gleaming corporate headquarters where my wife had sold her soul. Vanessa was already at the federal building downtown, meeting with prosecutors as part of her cooperation agreement. Tommy sat across from my desk, looking satisfied with a job well done. "Peterson's been arrested," he said, checking his phone. "Securities fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. Sarah Kim and Michelle Torres are in custody too." "What about the others?" "The Singapore women are fighting extradition." Peterson's assistant lawyered up immediately. "It's going to be a mess, but the prosecutors think they have enough to make the charges stick." I nodded, feeling strangely detached from the chaos I'd helped create. For months, I'd been planning this moment, imagining how it would feel to watch Peterson's empire crumble. I'd expected satisfaction, vindication, maybe even joy. Instead, I felt empty. "You okay?" Tommy asked. "I destroyed my wife's life. Your wife destroyed her own life. You just made sure she faced consequences for it." "Same thing in the end?" Tommy was quiet for a moment. "You want to know what I think? I think you're a better man than any of them deserved. You could have just divorced her, taken half the assets, and walked away. Instead, you made sure that justice was served." "Justice?" I tasted the word, found it bitter. "Is that what this is? What else would you call it?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. Vanessa's lawyer. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Patricia Hendricks. I'm representing your wife in the federal case." "How is she?" "Scared, remorseful, and very, very lucky that she decided to cooperate. The prosecutors are recommending no jail time in exchange for her testimony." "What does that mean for us? Financially, I mean." "Well, she'll have to forfeit the profits from the insider trading, of course, about $200,000, and there will be civil penalties. But your personal assets should be protected, assuming you can prove you had no knowledge of her activities." I could prove it. Tommy and I had been very careful to document my ignorance, creating a paper trail that showed I'd actually lost money by selling Peterson Industries stock before the merger announcement. What about her career? She'll never work in finance again. The SEC will ban her from serving as an officer or director of any public company, but she'll avoid prison, and that's what matters. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, staring out the window at the suburban street where I'd built what I thought was a perfect life. "What happens now?" Tommy asked. "Now we see if there's anything left to salvage." Vanessa came home that evening, looking like she'd aged 10 years in a single day. She moved through our house like a ghost, touching familiar objects as if she were seeing them for the last time. "How did it go?" I asked. I told them everything, every detail, every meeting, every lie. She sank onto the couch, still wearing the conservative business suit her lawyer had picked out for her federal testimony. "Peterson's lawyer tried to make it seem like I seduced him, like I was the mastermind behind everything." "What did you say?" "The truth, that I was weak and scared and stupid enough to think that sleeping with my boss was the price of success." She looked at me with hollow eyes. "Do you hate me?" I considered the question seriously. Did I hate her? I'd been angry for so long that it was hard to separate my feelings into distinct emotions. "I hate what you did," I said finally. "I hate the lies, the betrayal, the way you made me feel like I wasn't good enough for you. But hate you? I don't know. Maybe I'm too tired to hate anyone anymore." "The lawyer says we should probably get divorced. It would protect you financially if there are any other legal complications." "Is that what you want?" "I want to go back in time and make different choices, but since I can't do that," she shrugged. "I want whatever's best for you. You didn't deserve any of this." We sat in silence for a while. Two people who'd shared a life trying to figure out if there was anything left to share. "I've been thinking," I said eventually, "about what comes next. And I think we should try." Vanessa looked up, surprised. "Try what?" "To rebuild, to figure out who we are without all the lies and pretense and corporate ambition. It won't be the same. It can't be. But maybe it could be something better." "David, I don't deserve. This isn't about what you deserve. It's about what I want. And what I want is to see if the woman I fell in love with is still in there somewhere." She started crying then. Not the careful tears of a woman worried about her makeup, but the raw, ugly sobs of someone whose carefully constructed world had collapsed around her. I held her while she cried. And for the first time in months, it felt like we were on the same side. The trials lasted 8 months. Peterson got 12 years in federal prison and a $50 million fine. Sarah Kim and Michelle Torres received suspended sentences and community service in exchange for their cooperation. The other conspirators received various punishments, ranging from fines to short prison terms. Vanessa testified at every trial, her voice steady and clear as she described the culture of corruption that Peterson had created. The media called her a whistleblower. The defense attorneys called her a scorned woman seeking revenge. She was probably a little of both. Through it all, we worked on rebuilding our marriage. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the anger would resurface, when I'd look at her and see not my wife, but the woman who'd betrayed everything we'd built together. There were days when she'd withdraw into herself, overwhelmed by guilt and shame. But there were also moments of grace. Quiet conversations over morning coffee. Walks through our neighborhood where we talked about everything except the trials and the lawyers and the wreckage of her career. Slowly, carefully, we began to remember why we'd fallen in love in the first place. 6 months after Peterson's sentencing, Vanessa started working at a nonprofit that helped women transition back into the workforce after incarceration. The pay was a fraction of what she'd made at Peterson Industries, but she came home energized in a way I hadn't seen in years. "I helped a woman named Maria today," she told me over dinner. "She's been out of prison for 3 months, can't find work because of her record. But she's brilliant, David, really brilliant. We're going to help her start her own business." I watched my wife's face light up as she talked about Maria's potential, and I realized that this was the woman I'd married. Not the corporate climber who'd lost herself in ambition and compromise, but the idealistic graduate student who'd wanted to change the world. "I'm proud of you," I said. "For what?" "For finding your way back." One evening, almost a year after the FBI raids, we were sitting on our back porch, watching the sunset paint our suburban street in shades of gold and amber. Vanessa was reading a book about social entrepreneurship. I was reviewing quarterly reports for my investment firm, which had thrived during the chaos of the Peterson Industries scandal. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't found out?" Vanessa asked suddenly. "About the affair?" "About all of it. The affair, the insider trading, everything." I thought about it. Peterson would have made his fortune from the merger. You and the others would have gotten your promotions and your illegal profits. And I would have spent the rest of my life married to a stranger, never knowing why you looked at me like I was furniture. Would that have been better? For who? For you. You could have lived your whole life without knowing what kind of person I'd become. I set down my papers and looked at her. "Van, the person you became in that world, that wasn't really you. It was a costume you put on because you thought it was what success looked like. The real you is sitting here with me, helping ex-convicts start businesses and reading books about changing the world." "How can you be sure?" "Because I know you. I've known you for 15 years through all the different versions of yourself you've tried on. The real you is the one who cried when we had to put down our first dog, the one who spent her vacation helping rebuild houses after Hurricane Sandy, the one who married a guy from a trailer park because she saw something in him that he didn't even see in himself." She was quiet for a long moment. "I lost myself for a while. We all lose ourselves sometimes. The important thing is finding the way back." As the sun set behind our house, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, I realized that this was what victory looked like. Not the destruction of my enemies or the satisfaction of revenge, but the quiet contentment of a life rebuilt on truth instead of lies. Peterson was in federal prison, his empire in ruins. The other conspirators had faced justice, and Vanessa and I had found something I'd thought was lost forever: a marriage based on honesty, forgiveness, and the hard work of loving someone through their worst mistakes. It wasn't the ending I'd planned when I first discovered those emails on her laptop, but it was better than anything I could have imagined. "I love you," Vanessa said softly. "I love you too," I replied, and for the first time in over a year, I meant it completely.